say yes until you have to say no. I believe doors open sometimes and you don't know why until you figure that out.
Hello there, it's me, Steve Mellor, and welcome in to GrowthReady, the podcast that allows high performers to reveal the reality behind what it means to ready yourself for growth, the personal and professional challenges along the growth journey, while also allowing the high performance executive coach in me to satisfy his curiosity toward what drives optimal performance. On this episode, we welcome in the Executive Director for Sales at Service First Mortgage, John Donnelly, whose growth journey began when he was willing to identify where his true value lied. Because once we know our value, we are ready to say yes to the opportunities that lead to the greatest growth. Hey guys, as we get started here with the episode, I want to just take 1 minute of your time to make a request for you to subscribe and rate the show. For our show to be easily discovered by other potential listeners, we need our current listeners, that's you, to take the time to not only subscribe, but to also rate the show. Whether you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, whatever platform of choice, there are typically ways to be rating the show. So go ahead and click something like that 5th star and be sure to take that additional time to leave a comment or two about why it is you enjoy listening to the GrowthReady podcast. Your efforts on this will allow our show to be more discoverable, which means we're going to find more listeners and continue to have that significant impact on the community of human performance and personal development that I know you are all benefiting from by being listeners to this show. Please go ahead, take the time, subscribe, rate the show today. Hey, and while you're at it, why don't you share it with a few people as well? I appreciate you guys. Let's get to the interview. Hello there, and welcome in to the most recent installment of the GrowthReady podcast. I'm so excited to be welcoming in John Donnelly to the show today. And John is coming all the way from Dallas, Texas, not too far from me down here in the South. But John, before we start learning so much more about your backstory, the work you're doing today, and I know some great insights you're going to be providing to us along the way, I'm going to ask you what I ask everybody as we get started. What does it mean to you to be growth ready?
To be growth ready to me means that I have a growth mindset. I'm listening more than I'm talking. I'm going to say yes to opportunities until it's time to say no. And that's the only way I've learned to open up my mind and hear new things, is to just hear what people say, because their perspective or their opportunity may not be what you first think it is, or the way you might prejudge something. When you've got to really hear out the details sometimes. And so something I'm kind of known for here at my company is that little saying, like, say yes until you have to say no. I believe doors open sometimes and you don't know why until you figure that out. And it's kind of okay to let other ones close along the way. So you gotta have an open mind, and you've got to be a good listener to find your way into the new opportunities sometimes.
Yeah, well, we already have our episode title right there. Say yes until you have to say no. You helped us out.
Okay,
really,
perfect.
really,
I love it.
really with a layup there. Sometimes we rack our brains in the production team. What can be creative? What's a good way to phrase this one? But you delivered there from the outset. But what I always enjoy about the way people answer this question is that sometimes it comes through almost as a process. Sometimes people answer it and it's more of just an experience. And then sometimes you hear this sort of process almost creating itself as you're speaking through it. And what I'm alluding to there is, like, again, we start with this desire and this want to listen. And through that act of listening, suddenly now we have the ability to say yes and to say no, but only if we're listening well. If we're not listening well, we don't know what we're saying yes to. We don't know what we're saying no to. And so I'm hearing this process start to really reveal itself immediately. And ideally, we practice this open-mindedness. And so I want to actually start there. Is the open-minded insight is for you when you look at the world that you operate in. You are working there, and again, you're going to give us some more insights about the work that you do today. But you work within an industry, if you will, that is structured
Yes.
Things are the way they are, and a
Right.
lot of the time you don't get to have much of a say in how things are. You just have to kind of play it by the book. And here you are now coming in with this entire insight around open-mindedness. So start there with me. Give us some more context around the work you're doing today, but also how do you practice open-mindedness in a world that comes with so much,
Yes.
structure?
No, it's great. And it does matter a lot because the world's changing right in front of our eyes more than ever, especially in my industry. So I'm in the mortgage industry. I run sales for a mortgage company. I've been at Service First Mortgage based out of Dallas for 16 years. I've been in the industry since 1997. So I've been around a while. I've been through the crash and the Great Recession and all kinds of stuff. And so I've got to see a lot of ups and downs. And if you think about what you just said, we are a structured business. We have a lot of rules and regulations and guidelines, but the way we do our business is always changing, the process and the system and the way you build that. And I think that when we're literally hypothesizing daily. I've had these conversations already today. What is our industry going to look like? What's the role of the loan officer going to look like in 5 years from now? And AI is changing everything that we know. And where is it actually going to give us lift, or where is it not? And we're in that discovery mode right now, I think, of where is it actually going to impact us? We're seeing it start to finally. I think in our industry, at least in our company, we've added all this technology, but we haven't added a lot of speed and efficiency over the years. But maybe just now, we're really starting to see that we're getting some gain for all this money we're spending on technology. And I think it's going to compound very quickly over the next few years and change rapidly. And I don't think a single person can tell us what it's going to look like in 5 years from now and with confidence. And so with that being said, it's scary to some people. The uncertainty can bother people. It actually is exciting to me because it creates opportunity, but you have to be looking for that opportunity and you have to be open to try to adapt to it. I think the way we've done business in the past is going to be different, especially in our sales roles. We used to be where being a loan technician mattered and your guidelines. I think the technology is going to make that pretty easy to
Mhm.
where you're going to be more of a salesperson, a relationship person, more like an influencer type person, driving people to your company and your offering. So
Yeah.
I think we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm right.
But there's an open-mindedness even to that insight right there. It's just like, I think that's how it's going to be, but who am I to
Maybe.
say, right? Who
Right.
am I to say? Maybe we will have to wait and see. And that is hard for a lot of folks that come from industries like yours, where you're almost getting into it in a way for the structure. It's just like, hey,
Right.
pretty much this is going to be what it's going to be. I like the idea of getting into an industry that will be structured, that this is like A plus B is going to equal C in terms of the way in which we approach most things. However, there's something that you said there immediately in your response, is that whether it be the industry or the set of circumstances, the way we then approach it and the way in which things are always evolving within it, that in itself is where we can have the open-mindedness, the approach, the process, however you want to look at it. And I think I'm most curious now just to learn, how have you been able to see yourself evolve over the course of your career when you think about maybe, I'm going to assume maybe a little bit of naivety when you first get into the industry
Yes.
versus
Yeah.
what you know today. Like, how have you personally seen yourself grow through open-mindedness and using it almost as a vehicle to your development here over the past however many years you've been doing it?
Yeah, I think one thing that comes to mind is I started as a loan officer in a call center for about 3 or 4 years, and I transitioned to building my own business, sourcing my own business. And then I lived in Arizona and I moved to Texas, which was back home for me. And in that transition, we had a baby. We didn't think we could have kids. I adopted my son all at the same moment. And then I took a job at our corporate office, and they literally said, "We need help, but we don't know what we need you to do. Just make yourself so valuable we can't afford not to have you." I
Right.
mean, how challenging is that? So I was like, well, I'll try this so I can learn kind of the corporate side of it versus being a sales guy out in the field. And that began a journey for me of like, what do I need to do and how do I help people? And so that was really interesting. I definitely didn't know what I was even prepared for. I didn't even know how to prepare
Mm,
for that, if you will. At the same time, I went from, married for almost 5 years to an instant family of a newborn, and I adopted my son who turned 3. And then I started this job where they didn't really know what to have me do other than I had experience and they wanted help.
Right.
And so it was a pretty wild moment. I kind of think about that moment, and how do you prepare? What I did is I started calling all the managers and all the branches and saying, "How can I help you?"
Mm,
And I just started trying to solve people's problems. And that began my path toward leadership and coaching and developing. That's
yeah.
really what it was for me.
Yeah. I
So that
love
was
that.
interesting time. I think when you fast forward that, I was put into a position a couple years later where I was the person in charge of this whole retail division. And the way I ended up there was because I found that they found I was really valuable because I kept having relationships with the people in the branches and I was solving their problems. And so they put me into this leadership role, you know. And what crazy thing, if you really look at my story, fast forward in 2008, this crash happens in the mortgage industry, and I was on my way out the door to go try to recruit a branch to come join our company, and I got a call that says, "We're going under. We're filing bankruptcy. We're going under. We're filing bankruptcy." And it was like you were worried about it because everybody was.
Hmm.
19 companies closed that same day. And we just lost both our warehouse lines. So anyway, I had to go back up, put all these people in a room and say, today's our last day. And I don't know how you prepare for that. I wasn't prepared for that. I
Mm,
didn't, I knew it could happen, but I never really sat down and said, if it does, what am I going to do? And so the amazing thing was my entire staff almost showed up the next day knowing they weren't getting paid because they felt an obligation to help people figure out how to deal with their closing on their house and, and all that. And we didn't know what to do. So I went to work and I interviewed companies for a few days, found a home, and I ended up where I'm at today at Search First Mortgage in February of '09, and I brought like hundreds of loans in boxes and just this challenge onto our company. And they needed us too because the Service First wasn't very big and we didn't have a very big retail mortgage presence. So what we brought to the table was kind of what the company needed at that moment. We just had to learn together and it was chaos,
yeah.
a little bit,
Yeah. Yeah,
a little bit
but
of chaos.
there's all these. I'm hearing so many. Firstly, just the two really just powerful stories that have this sort of full circle moment because I'm hearing all these human elements within this very professional environment that I think anybody listening to this, no matter the industry, walk of life that you come from, you can immediately relate to. Like that first idea of like, hey, we need your help. We just don't know why or where, and it's almost like having a bucket of water and someone saying there's a fire around here somewhere, but we just
Yeah,
don't know where the fire is. But when
that's
we
true.
do, when we see the smoke, we'll know that we have you with the bucket of water ready to go. But the fact that you then took it on your own to say, hey, you know what, maybe the best thing I can do right now is just simply make myself known to people that I can
Right.
be of help, that I can be of value. And then to fast forward to that moment there with the when the crisis hit in '08, like you're able to, whether you were doing this forwardly or on a subconscious level as a leader, the fact of the matter is the proof came in that next day after that meeting of like, people thought, how can I be of help? Like,
Yeah.
even though I'm not getting paid, how can I be of help? And I think that that is so powerful to hear that that is something that can come through. Again, if we go all the way back to where we started, this idea of can you be open minded within an industry, within an environment that is in a way doing everything in its power to keep you structured and by the book and do things a certain way. And so I don't know, I find that fascinating and I'm almost curious for you too. Hearing me sort of speak it back is how much of that were you aware of as it was happening?
I was definitely touched the fact that the staff showed up. I did
Hmm.
know that. To the level of the commitment they had, I didn't realize or the awareness. I still have 8 people that work with me today that worked with me at that company, 20 years ago, and we all still work together on like a family. We know each other so well. And so there's definitely power in that. When you look back and you think about it, it's really cool to remember the stories and the things you've been through, but there's no way I could have known or been prepared for some of the stuff we were facing, at the
Mm.
time.
Yeah.
And so you just have to I learned a long time ago, this is kind of something that's interesting is I would be in my early days, I figured this out quick as a leader. I would have people come to me in a department that maybe I hadn't worked in before, funding or closing department, where I was always the sales guy. And so they would come to me, and I was responsible for these groups now, and I didn't quite have the experience. And so they would say, "Hey, we got this." So I learned real quickly. I would always ask, "Well, how do you think we should fix it?" You know, even if because sometimes I didn't know, and so they would tell me a lot. Like 99% of the time, they just wanted the confidence to know that their answer was right. And so I would always like after that be like, "That sounds great. Go do it." You know, like that's the right move. And so that was my beginning, you know, of being a leader and a manager and all that. Kind of learned that little trick of how to like learn and ask people and gain wisdom along the way without feeling like I look like I didn't know what I was doing, you know,
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
And so that's been big for me is just and I think that's an open mindset too. Like your employees probably have the answer a lot of times, but I know in my industry, there's so many rules and regulations. You second guess yourself all the time. So you just want a little confidence. Like, I think this is right. Am I thinking right? That's what most people want.
Yeah, and we're sometimes we become the victim of just knowing too much. Sometimes in those industries, we allow all this information and what we know to just about paralyze us from a human decision or a
Yeah.
human behavior that we would outside of that world. If we were at home, we would just instinctively do. If we were around friends, we just instinctively do. And I think that's where we really get to the heart of the theme of the show and to the power of your story here is at the end of the day, like, yeah, know your environments, know your industry, whatever circumstances you find yourself in professionally, know them well, but at the same time, prioritize human behavior. Like,
Yes.
so much of what you're speaking to here, John, is
Yeah.
like, can you lead with human behavior? Not necessarily if you're leading people, just yourself. Just can you lead yourself with
Hmm.
human behavior when all the circumstances around you are just screaming, hey, structure, structure, structure. And you're just going, you know what? I respect it and I know it, but I'm still a human at the heart of all this. And how can I actually lead and take steps and just simply behave in a more human way within this structure, right?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. It's kind of around the idea of the relationship you have with these people. I don't know why, but when you say it that way, I think of my wife and I joke about this statement, "Are you a rule follower?" Sometimes. Somehow this relates to human behavior, but my answer is always as long as it makes sense, you know, as long as the rule makes sense to me. And
Right.
there's times where the rule is you're supposed to go this way, and that doesn't make sense to me, you know. And so I maybe not follow the rules in that time.
Mm,
But that's like you got to assess things and think on your own and make your
mhm.
own decisions and not just be, you know, blind to what people are telling you. I don't know exactly why that came to mind while you said it, but that's in the same vein somehow.
Well, it shows it shows conscious thought. It shows that you're willing to at least pay enough attention to actually look at a rule and sometimes put it into question and just say, hey, like I hear what you're saying. I understand this is what the manual says or what the rules are, but from a logical standpoint, I just don't see it. And you almost, we are cut from a similar cloth when it comes to that, John.
Yeah.
What the scariest thing that I'm learning now. I have a 5-year-old son of my own, and it turns out that the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree when it comes to that line of logic. And
Yeah.
he's a couple of weeks into pre-K, and there's a lot of rules that he's not following because he doesn't see the logic in them. So
That's funny.
that's a whole nother story. But there's so much truth to that. It's why I don't get too upset about it, and why I'm
Right.
able to sort of laugh about it in regards to that, much less significant situation. But there's so much truth to that. At a certain point, we go through a course of our life where rules don't necessarily mean what they do to us once we get older and the magnitude and we understand the consequences of them. We look at things through this lens of logic until people force the rule on us enough to where we almost cave to the
Right.
rule. But that doesn't mean that the logic is therefore thrown out the window. And that's what I'm hearing from you is like just through this open-minded practice,
Yep.
we're staying more cognizant of what's going on. We're being more present in the moment.
Yes, I think that's so important. In April, we were on a company trip, like a President's Club trip to Aruba. And when you come to the airport, they say show up 3 hours early. And it's the long lines, and you got to go through customs twice, and it's just kind of a beat down. And there was a moment of chaos, and the lines were kind of all over the place. And the security guard started like whipping everybody into shape. And she was like, "You come over here, you go over here, you do that." And we all kind of froze. And there's a couple of people, they didn't like being told what to do, and they didn't like the rules, if you will. But I was there with Sean, the owner of my company, and we were watching this girl, and she was young, and she was just putting herself out there. And he goes, "You know what's interesting about this moment is most of us feel safe to know she's in charge right now.
Mm,
And most of us appreciate the fact that she's taking charge and getting some organization to the chaos that's going
yeah.
on right now. And what a great leadership lesson. And I hadn't really thought about that, but this kind of rule, challenging the rules and all that, it reminded me of that moment and how it made us really feel safe to know that somebody's in charge, that it seems to be we trust
Hmm.
for whatever reason. We don't know her, but we trusted her. And it made us all kind of relax and go, okay, we're going to get through this line here and it's not going to be the end of the world, you know?
Yeah. No, I love it. And those people are always looking at us through this logical lens and wondering, why are these grown up, educated individuals unable to see that there's space here and there's space there, and they're
Yes.
all acting like sheep and they're all staying together. And
Yeah.
I can only imagine how infuriating that is to watch day in, day out. But I love that story, and it definitely underlines the point. But this is actually a nice little segue to get to where intuitively I felt this could be a good theme for the episode, which is this idea of yeses leading to no, and saying yes until you have to say no. And one could argue that there's going to be some practice of logic and open mindedness through that process. So I'd love to just simply start just a little open ended here with you, John. Is like, where did this theory, this outlook, this approach that you have, where did it originate? Where did it come from?
I think I'm naturally just curious. A friend of mine told me the other day, there's a whole story here, but I climbed Kilimanjaro in June.
Hmm. Let's just 1 second there. We that's not something you typically just mention and like as if there's no real story
Okay.
there. So just maybe give us a teeny bit more
Yeah,
context of
yeah.
just
We'll
like
get
how did we end up climbing Kilimanjaro,
climb.
and then
Okay.
go back to the story.
Then we can go back to that story. But so I'm curious. I read a lot of books and a lot of times I'll listen and I'll walk. And that's kind of my happy place. Like I've
Hmm.
learned that I can take my dog sometimes, or other times I'll just walk for like an hour and listen to a book. Sometimes 2 or 3 hours. In this case, I read this book a friend of mine recommended, and it's called The 12-Hour Walk. So I'm walking, listening to this book, and it challenges you to walk out your front door for 12 hours. No music, no friends, no dogs, then just take food and water. And it's kind of like a meditation and just think, you know? And so I told my wife I finished on a Thursday and I said, hey, on Saturday, I'm doing this 12-hour walk. And I think that's important because I've talked about this to a lot of people, and people get interested, they'll read the book, but then they'll say, I'm gonna do it eventually, or I'm gonna do that walk later. And they kind of
Mm,
when everything lines up perfect and the weather's right and my schedule's clear, I'll do it. I've had about 5 people do it that I know of, and probably 35 people tell me they want to.
hmm.
I just finished it and I said, I'm going. I didn't I didn't even know anybody's done this. I knew the author, I knew who he was. Colin O'Brady's his name. Great
Hmm.
book.
Yep.
So I walk out my front door. I tell her, "Hey, pick me up." I left at 5:30 in the morning. I said, "Wherever I'm at on Life 360, you find me and pick me up." I don't know where I'm going. I just know I'm walking for 12 hours.
Yeah.
And it was a cool experience. I
Hmm.
walked 30 miles. I had no idea I could walk 30 miles. I'd never gone that far.
Hmm.
I wrote 17 pages of notes through mostly speaking into my phone into a journal app, and then just went on this adventure, through the town, and
Yeah.
we ended up all over the place. It was
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
And so in that moment, I thought a couple of things. One of them was, I'm turning 50. I really want to get my physical shape a little bit better. That's one place I'm a little weak at. So I want to train. And I've had this idea of Kilimanjaro for more than 10 years. I'm like, this is the moment. My kids are in college now and I can do it. So I committed to that. And that was a whole journey for a year of working out, eating better, and then having this vision out there that just every day I wake up and I'm like, I got to get ready. I can't go to that mountain and not be ready. I want to make it to the top. I
Mm,
told everybody on social media I'm going. A friend of mine committed and then he backed out. And then 3 months before I went, another friend of mine said, I don't want you to go by yourself. I want to go with you. He
mhm,
felt called to come with me. I thought that was like amazing friendship moment for me, that somebody would just come along because they didn't want me to be by myself, on a
mhm.
trip to Africa.
Yeah.
And so It was awesome. It was
And
a
so let's pause right there.
yeah.
So firstly, every single listener is like, thank you, Steve, for interrupting him
Okay.
and forcing him to actually tell us that story. You made it sound like Kilimanjaro was like just going to the gym, like the way you
Yeah,
frame that. And
that's
so
funny.
I'm so glad that I asked, because I think that before you even get to answering the initial question that I asked around, how did we come up with this concept of saying yes until we have to say no? There's already so much evidence of the power of what the answer to that question could be in that story.
Yeah.
Here we are as someone that just said, not only am I going to read a book, but I'm going to read the book with enough intent that once I'm done reading it, the call to action is so significant that I know the longer I delay it, the longer I say no to doing
Yes.
it, the likelihood I will not eventually say yes to it. Like that right there, you can forget the rest of the story from that point on,
Yeah.
but that
There
in
you go.
itself is absolute gold. I mean, that is growth. And then, hey, you just set us up perfectly for the theme, and the whole point of the show is that then you get to the idea of Kilimanjaro and you're like, I'm not doing it until I'm ready.
Yeah.
That's what we're about on this show. We're literally about, are you going to do the work to get ready? And so here you are telling this story of not only having the vision and knowing like there's this timeline I'm going to put on it. If I don't put the timeline, the likelihood is it's never going to happen. So by putting it on and pulling in some support, and even if people pull out and other people are going to step up because they're going to see the conviction in which I'm going about doing this and the desire I have to get ready in order to go and accomplish this thing. There's so many opportunities there where you could have said no and you
Yes.
consistently said yes. And like that right there, brother, like again, I've got so many people right now listening being like, Steve, thank you so much for asking him to explain the Kilimanjaro story, because
Yes.
that in itself is true gold, and it just supports so much of this notion around saying yes until you have to say no. I'm just curious, even as I speak that back to you, do you get that feeling when you look back on that journey? Like, is that how it felt to you while you were going through it?
It did a little bit, meaning I think kind of going back to how this happened, I feel like in some earlier coaching in my career, one of the things I was told was I'm an idea guy, but I had so many ideas, I couldn't implement them all. Well, I took that to heart at some point and kind of switched and said, I'm going to implement as much as I can, and
Mm,
just try to fight against it. And I think that one of those switches was I had to take action fast. And so I'm very intentional about that in my life now to where I wasn't early on. I would overthink things. I would have lots of ideas. Some of them would be great. Some of them you'd think about them a while, they wouldn't be, but I wouldn't really take action on very many of them. Now I've almost have the problem of taking action on too many things, but I learned so much more. I have so much more energy. I learn more than by doing and failing a couple of times than I would by thinking about something, not doing anything, which we know that. And so that's just my personal progression of being intentional, really being intentional about taking action. And I don't always take action like that. When I see when the clarity is there, the vision is there, then it's the clear vision just makes you run at something so easy. You don't have to think about all the steps involved. And I think that's probably one of the lessons here. I knew when I took that walk and I was like, this is my moment to do Kilimanjaro. I was prepared to go by myself.
yeah.
There was moments of where I was walking in like early in the morning in the dark and late at night where I would think about this is the time that like late at night by yourself in the dark when nobody's looking, this is when growth happens sometimes.
Mm,
And I remember those moments and I think about those a lot because those all came into play on the hard summit night going up that mountain on Kilimanjaro. Most of it was pretty good, but the summit night was a beast for me.
yeah.
And so all that preparation mattered. And I learned from myself, like if you think about Olympic athletes and all that, they train for 4 years to get their moment
Hmm.
by themselves, maybe with a coach, maybe not. And all that work goes into that moment that they have. And nobody thinks about that. Nobody cares. They don't even talk about it. Either
No.
you win or you don't.
Yeah.
And that's what I was thinking about was I'm either going to make it to the top or I'm not. And
Yep.
that's all anybody's gonna think about. And, for me, that's what I thought they would think about, "Did you
Yep.
make it or not?" I
Yep.
made it.
Yeah.
Thank God, because I didn't wanna go and not make it.
Right. Right. Success, failure, however you want to put it. I think something that you're really getting to the heart of here is this notion like, hey, if we have to be the one that wants to do the work. Like the
Yes,
result, people will judge the result. But people love sitting in their armchair and judging the result. People love being behind their desk and judging and assessing the result. It's one of the easiest things for us to do. But the fact is, they don't know. Like you say it with the Olympic athletes. I've worked with Olympic athletes. Like again, you're exactly right. No one on NBC during the Olympics is talking about the 4 years before
yes,
before the final. They're all just talking about the final, the athlete, the race, whatever it is, and that's
yeah,
it. And there's no discussion of the 4 years, and quite frankly, the many many years before those 4 years that
exactly.
that really come with it.
Their whole career.
The whole
I mean, it's their
career,
whole career if you think about it
yeah,
that way, to lead to
yeah.
that one moment.
Yeah. And here you are now with the Kilimanjaro story. It's like, yeah, there was that year of preparation specifically for Kilimanjaro, but the work that you did across your life to get to that point of realization heading into that year of like, hey, this actually matters. And I've done the work around myself to know myself enough to say, if I'm coming up with the idea, I know I have to take action right away, because if I don't, it festers and it slowly disappears. By the way, that makes you incredibly human. And so like that in
Yes.
itself is such an integral part of this going back all the way now. And this is one thing I love to do on the show time sometimes is ask a question and prevent you from answering it for 10 minutes. But now I'm going to actually let you answer the question that I initially asked you
Yeah, yeah,
around this notion of like, where did this come from? Where did this originate? We're hearing a lot of that already in this
yeah.
story, but I'd now love for you just to kind of almost, okay, we're going right back to where we were 10 minutes ago now. We just passively mentioned we come off the back of climbing Kilimanjaro, but here you are coming to this awareness of like the power of saying yes until you're forced to say no.
Yeah, I think there's two other things that have impacted where I came up with this. One is there's a guy named Bob Goff. He's written a book called Love Does. He's a preacher, but he's an attorney. He's got a great story. He's the one that actually inspired Kilimanjaro for me years ago, and that's a whole nother thing. But his advice, one of his things he'll teach you is he quits something every Thursday. It's like one of his things. I quit something every Thursday, and it could be all different things in life because he says yes to so many things. He's got to force himself to say no once in a while because you get too busy. And so I started thinking about that, as I learned from him. Probably that was in 2015, probably 10 years ago. I probably started hearing that lesson. And then this is a different story, but the same. My job is I do a lot of recruiting. And when you're recruiting, you don't know the person that you're talking to. You're just getting to know them. And so it can be really easy to prejudge somebody based on, in our industry, it's a small industry. They say there's 7 degrees to Kevin Bacon. We're like 2 degrees to knowing every person
To
in the
know
mortgage
everyone.
industry, and so I always say with 2 phone calls, I can find out about anybody in our industry, and we
Right.
know enough people. And so you kind of, a lot of times, if you say, hey, I worked here and I've done this, I'm going to prejudge you just like that. And I don't know
Mm.
that's right or fair, but I'm going to have an opinion about you. And so, like Sean over my company now, we do a lot of recruiting together and we'll call each other. And the say yes before you say no really came from recruiting because he's like, hey, so-and-so called me. And we both might go, what we know about that person, maybe they're not a good fit for us. And that's where I started saying, well, just say yes and see what they're about before we take their preconceived opinion that we may not be fair or true. And so that's where that was really birthed from, kind of this idea. But then you start applying it to your life. My kids could tell you that I say this. My wife could tell you this is one of my little sayings.
Yeah.
And I believe that it's important because you're going to miss out on some cool stuff in life if you don't
Mm.
just listen to the opportunities that come at you.
Love that. Love that. And I love that you're able to even segue it into your role as a father and as a husband. I think that's huge. I think one thing we can always find a way to do better on this show is how can we personalize the
Hmm.
insights? How can we personalize the takeaways? I always try my best to make it about human performance. Like in the world I operate in, we can harp on about professional versus personal development all day long, or we can just say, you know what, it's human development, it's human performance.
Yes.
That's what it is. And both play a part and both require the same amount of respect, but to separate and prioritize one over the other more consistently, I think is unfair to the other. And so we go, okay, how do we make it about both? How do we make it consistent towards the human? I think that's what you're helping us do here is just by something as simple as like, hey, this isn't something that the people I've been leading for 10 years, whatever, would say about me. This is the people that I spend the majority of my time with in my own household would say about me. Like, this is who I am. And I'd love to get this from you because it's something that really the work that I do today, we pride ourselves in through this work is, how do you, what level of ease, I guess, do you have around the way in which you're showing up in all these different roles and these different rooms that you walk into every single day, because you have a lot of different hats in your
Right.
life. But how does being consistent in terms of how you show up help you in how you wear those hats and how you show up?
Being consistent is the most important thing to me as far as like being the person who I want people to perceive me. This is kind of my story is I hope that people would perceive me as being a class act. This is a term I came up with on that 12-hour walk, mind you. This is new for me. And the reason I say that, this is my words for what that means. I've thought about this idea that kind of comes from a couple of books, In Good to Great. And anyway, a couple books, there's a concept of like, who's your board of directors, your personal board of directors, right? And so there's a book called Your Next Five Moves. And in that book, he paints a picture up on his wall in his office of his 10 people there in his board of directors in a certain way. And I remembered reading that and it stuck with me. And so when I was on this walk, I was like, who is my board of directors? I was just thinking about it. I didn't know what that meant. I mean, you're on 12 hours of walking, you got a lot of thinking to do. And so I made a list and I said, I'm going to
Mm,
learn about these people I think are my people. And I came up with 11. And then my takeaway after I kind of thought it through it was, what do all these people have in common? And my takeaway was, I feel like they're all somebody I would say is a class act. Like the way they show up, the way they carry themselves, the way they present themselves in a room, kind of how you say that. And so that consistency is important. And, the way you just show up. And so I guess that's a roundabout answer to get there. But the way I show up is I think about it now. This is something I've been working on. Like if I'm a class act, how do I show up on this podcast today or to my next meeting? Or, I told my kids I'm climbing Kilimanjaro. They're gonna watch me. Am I gonna quit? Am I gonna tell everybody I'm gonna do it? Am I gonna flake out? Am I gonna get halfway up and peter out? Like, what's gonna happen? And
mm,
that's kind of stuff drives me, to do what I say and lead by example. That's a big thing for me. I don't like to follow leaders that haven't done the things that I want to do. They need to have the skins on the wall because I want to learn from them because they've been on that journey. So I'm trying to be that person for the next generation coming up, if
I
you
love
will.
that. I love that. And really what you're talking to here is practicing more intentional self-awareness as well. Like to do that walk and actually have this idea of, yeah, it's one thing to create the board of directors. It's another thing to look at the consistency in terms of the identity of how you would capture that group.
Yeah.
And in doing so, you're actually putting a vision of what you hold true and most important to you. Like by looking at that and saying like, hey, I see class acts across all 11 people. That's what I want to hold myself accountable to. I want to be seen as a class act. Therefore, how do I
Yes.
gain that greater level of awareness of how I'm showing up? And how do I then embody being that class act each and every day? I think that you're capturing a level of consciousness and just self awareness that I think is so hard to do without that level of intentionality that you've led through this process.
Yeah. And I would say I was not mature enough to even think like this early on.
Yeah.
Something is I've grown and learned and read enough books and it was Think and Grow Rich. It was the first book. It's like around masterminding and this idea, and then Good to Great, and then the next five moves. Kind of those three books created this idea for me. But I had to learn and read all these books and understand these concepts and kind of not do a good job sometimes and fail at stuff and realize, okay, I want to be seen this way. I want to show up this way. I want my kids, I want my ceiling to be the floor for my kids,
Mm,
wherever I'm at, I want that to be the floor for them so they can achieve more in life. Well, that's a big responsibility when you think about it that way. But
mm,
those are the
yeah.
things I think about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm hearing not only that level of self-awareness, but I'm also hearing like it's one thing to know what you want for others, but it's another thing to own the fact that it starts with what you want firstly for yourself. And I think
Yes.
and it's okay to lead with that. It sounds selfish on the surface, but if there was an end to that work and the end is how can I better serve and support what it is I want for others by better investing what it is I want for myself, then that sounds like a really worthwhile and in many ways selfless act on your part, that you are lifting others up. And I love that terminology of just looking at another ceiling, looking at my own ceiling and saying, how can I take my ceiling and make it another person that matters most to me, their floor?
Right.
Like that is a level of servant that few are willing to commit to. And I think you acknowledging that this is not something that you've mastered and probably never will, but it's an ongoing process and it's an ongoing body of work that you're even still qualifying as new over the course of your life. You said
Right.
that a couple minutes ago. It's just like,
Yeah.
this is still new to me. And it sounds like we're about a year or two into it. So most
Right.
people would say that's not new. It's like, well, over the course of life, a year or two is pretty new. It's
It's
pretty
pretty
new.
new. The
Yeah.
reason I think it's new also is I've gone on this journey to learn more about these people I chose. Like you may know about, like, one of mine's Kobe Bryant, right? So I know about Kobe Bryant. I love basketball my whole life. I like the Mamba mentality. But now all of a sudden I read a few books and watch a few documentaries on him. Now I'm like going deep and learning. Well, if I have to do that on 11 people, I may find some things I don't appreciate and change my person.
100%.
But it's just the learning part of that is fun to me. And so I just kind of do that. I mix that into my life, and it's just something I don't have a time frame. I'm just learning and thinking about it and trying to be better through the
Wow.
learning how other people do it.
I love that. I love that. I've got you. You may not see it on Riverside, but those of you that do watch on YouTube, I have Kobe hovering over my right shoulder in a form of artwork at all times for some very similar reasons to what we've been speaking about here. But I think one thing, John, that is coming through this entire conversation is that your willingness to say yes more often than not has allowed you to at least gain an opportunity to say no more decisively, to actually make
Yes.
make better judgment when it comes to saying no. And I think that there's a freedom that comes with that, right?
Definitely, there's a freedom. You're in control of saying yes and no, and you only have so much time every day. So sometimes you say yes so much, you have to sit down and maybe quit things on Thursday and Friday. If you have too many things going on, but you got to make adjustments
Mm.
and look at your commitments. And I know earlier on, I sound like you're in a phase of life where I was, where my kids were younger, and I'm doing everything with them all the time.
Hmm.
And now my kids they're off. My son's a ski instructor,
Right.
you know, crazy. So he's coming and going. My daughter did the Disney college program for a while and is
Heck yeah.
back home. Like, they're doing these cool things. I'm challenging them to, like, follow their dreams and figure things out. But I find myself having a lot more time for me now, which is cool because these are the things I'm working on for
Hmm.
myself, like,
Yeah.
and it's really still about the kids, probably.
Hmm.
Like, how can I learn and be the example to help them? I'm so worried about them figuring out their way in this world today. And
Hmm.
so I'm just trying to help, get them ready for whatever it
Yeah.
is they're gonna face, I
There you
guess,
go.
you
Love it.
know?
Love it. And brother, whenever someone comes on and says, I'm trying to figure out how to get them ready, that's a beautiful place for us to press pause and to stop the conversation, because you're capturing what the show's all about in a beautiful sentiment right there. And so much of the work that you're doing, whether it be to get yourself, your kids, your team, all of these different pieces in your world to feel and get ready for what it is that you're trying to take on. It's pretty clear, it's pretty apparent that the process and the work that you're doing towards that is significant, and you're finding a way to make it work for you. And that's what we're about on this show. We're getting an individual insight about an individual process that you've taken through your individual experiences. And some people are going to hear this and know that there's a couple things in here that, based on your insights, that they can certainly be doing better. And that's what we're about. If we can help someone shift just one area of their life through every conversation that we have, then it was 45 minutes well spent listening. And from my perspective, it was certainly 45 minutes well spent having the conversation. But John, listen, brother, before I let you go, where can we learn more about you, the work, the company? I always give everybody the space here at the end just to let us know any information we can possibly need to know about
Yeah.
reaching out.
I think my best place to reach me is just on LinkedIn. The John Donnelly. It's simple. That's my tag. You'll find me. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. You can message me there, learn about me. It's easy to reach out. My job is to lead sales in the mortgage industries. If you want to find out what we offer here or learn about what we're about, I'd love to
Yeah.
visit with you. So
Yeah.
that's it.
I love it. It's nice to speak with the John Donnelly, the one. So when
That's
you
right.
search that on LinkedIn, you will find the John Donnelly. I love it. John, listen, brother, this has been an absolute blast. Really appreciate the time. Thanks so much for the generosity of insights, and just best of luck with everything in your world.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really enjoy the conversation and the feedback you're giving me, and make me think about the things I've gone on, like my journey. I'm
Mhm.
still unpacking what this Kilimanjaro climb has meant to me, and just talking it out with you kind of helps me see, some of the things I've learned and what that means, and it's great. I really appreciate your time.
You're so welcome.
Awesome.
And my thanks again to John for joining us on the show. John got me pretty fired up. I hope you can notice just in whether it be the audio or the YouTube especially, I leant forward a lot there. I got excited about some of the things that we were talking about, especially the Kilimanjaro story. It's always so fun. And John and I were talking just a little bit off air as we wrapped up. It's funny when you see someone's wheels really turning about the power of their insights that they don't even know they're making as they're making them. And sometimes I think that is a great lesson for us to even take from this episode. Yes, the theme of so much, especially in the second half of the discussion, was around this desire and this willingness to say yes until it makes sense to say no. But maybe a theme that I'm taking away from this discussion is just, are you willing to do the work to just say yes enough to get to know yourself better? You heard me allude to this notion of self-awareness through a lot of what John's work was around. And I think saying yes, of course, can create more opportunities, more possibilities, help you come to greater and clearer decisions, but it can also help you get to know yourself better. It can help you see things about yourself that you otherwise don't see. What might be some areas in your world right now where just by saying yes and entertaining an idea or a thought that you've had could just lead you to an action where you get to better know yourself? It doesn't have to be an action that leads to some huge commitment or some huge investment. Maybe the deposit of saying yes leads to a return where you simply build a greater level of self-awareness. Look at the 12-hour walk that John went on. Maybe you don't have to commit to something as long as 12 hours where you're off in isolation, but that walk led to him having some awareness of self. And that awareness of self led to some larger commitments down the road. But the return from that 12-hour walk deposit was a level of greater self-awareness. And maybe that in itself is enough of a return sometimes. Maybe we don't have to put such stakes around what's in it and what can we get from this investment. So just think about that for a moment. Take that time and just consider, can I make enough of a deposit into myself by saying yes to an idea, to a thought that I otherwise would just say no or dismiss? And what could the return potentially be? Just a level of self-awareness that I previously did not have. So again, my thanks to John for joining us. And as always, my thanks to you for listening. If you're new to the show, take the time to subscribe so that this quality episode is not the first and last example of Growth Ready. We have so many episodes that you can go back and listen to. We are knocking on the door now over the next few weeks of 2025 of episode 300. It's coming in the weeks and weeks ahead. We're still about 12 to 15 maybe episodes away as we record this one, but episode 300 will be here before you know it. So go back and listen to the other 250, 60 something episodes that you've previously not listened to. Put them in your library and get them cranked up and ready to go for that next long drive and that next trip. But otherwise, best of luck with anything and everything you've got going on in your world. And I look forward to doing this again with you very soon. Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to Growth Ready. If you liked what you heard and are feeling ready to grow, be sure to leave a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share the episode with someone you know is ready to fuel their growth journey today. We love our community, so don't hesitate to reach out to us at podcast@growthready.com. And until next time, we are Growth Ready, and you will be too.